When you want to deploy new changes to your users, there are different techniques that you can follow to do this. We'll be going over rolling deployments and blue-green deployments. Let's say that you have a service that has 5 different hosts that sit behind a load balancer. The reason you want a load balancer is so that you can evenly distribute the traffic your application sees across the 5 different hosts. In order for your new changes to take effect, you need to make sure that you deploy the new code onto all of the hosts in the group. One way to do this is through a rolling deployment. How it works is that you take one of the hosts serving traffic to your users and then you turn it off. You turn it off so that you can deploy the new changes onto that host. While the code is deploying onto this host, the 4 other hosts in the group are still serving traffic to your users. Once the host has finished deploying the new code changes, you repeat the process for all the other hosts. The reason it's called a rolling deployment is that you incrementally roll out the new code changes one host at a time. This is one of the advantages when it comes to a rolling deployment. When you deploy the new code changes onto the first host, only 20% of the hosts in your group have the new code. In theory, only 20% of your users will see the new code. If there's a bug, that means that only 20% of your users would see it. If you were to have deployed the new code changes onto all the hosts in your group, that means 100% of your users will see the buggy code. By deploying code changes one at a time, you reduce the blast radius of how many people can see the buggy code. This is something called a canary deployment. With canary deployments, you can set up alarms, logs, and metrics on the host that has the new code. If you see that latency or errors exceed a specific threshold, you know that something went wrong with the new code and that you can roll back into the previous code. One of the cons of rolling deployment is how long it takes to deploy and roll back your changes. If all the hosts have the new code changes and then you discover a bug, that means you need to revert all the hosts to the previous code one at a time. You cannot revert all the hosts back to the previous code at the same time, because if you do that, it means no host can serve traffic to your users and that you're experiencing downtime for your application. Another issue with rolling deployments is that there'll be points in time where you're serving the old and the new code. While this isn't an issue most of the time, there are instances where you need all the code changes deployed to all the servers at once, and rolling deployments don't support that. Another deployment technique is called blue-green deployments. Currently, our load balancer is pointing to a group of 4 different hosts. One of the issues with rolling deployments is that you have to deploy the code to one host at a time. If you turn off all 4 servers at once, that means your service will experience downtime, which is an issue. But what if there's a way for our new code changes to take effect immediately without any downtime? This is where blue-green deployments come into play. How it works is that you have 2 fleets of servers that serve production traffic. In our examples, we have 4 hosts in the blue environment and 4 hosts in the green environment. The load balancer currently forwards traffic to all the hosts in the blue environment, while the hosts in the green environment are in reserve. Since the hosts in the green environment are in reserve and not seeing production traffic, we can deploy the new changes into the host in this environment. Once we want to deploy the new code changes to our users, we can tell a load balancer to forward all the traffic from the blue environment to the host in the green environment. This way, we immediately serve the new code changes without experiencing any downtime. If we start to see any issues in the green environment, we can immediately roll back to the blue environment, since that blue environment was now in reserve. This makes deployments and rollback time much faster. However, one of the downsides is that you have to pay double the price of servers to support blue-green deployments. In this example, you need to pay for 4 hosts to serve production traffic, and then you need to pay for another 4 hosts in reserve to mimic the amount of hosts in production. This means you spend twice as much on servers to support blue-green deployments compared to rolling deployments. Another con is that you immediately deploy your code changes to 100% of your users. Unlike rolling deployments, this process is all or nothing. The blast radius is much bigger because you cannot monitor the logs and the metrics for only 20% of your users. 100% of your users would immediately start seeing the new code changes. So if you have a bug in this new code, that means 100% of your users will see the new bug. When it comes to deploying your new code changes and deployment techniques, there is no right way to do it. It's really dependent on what you value at that time. There are many factors like cost and maintainability that should determine what deployment technique you follow. Just pick whatever you're comfortable with and optimize when you need to. That's it for today. Hope you learned something new. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Take care, y'all.